Okay, we're up and running. We're going to try to get a little more info out here on our subject about who today is Israel, chosen of God. And I want to mention that in my last video, which was number 2, video number 2, I had made a couple of mistakes, and now I might already mentioned it, I don't know, but I think it's toward the end of the video. I didn't go back and look, but I can remember it's toward the end of the video. I was kind of naming off all of the sons of Jacob, the 12 sons, but then I said something about the 10 sons, or Jacob's 10 sons, or the 10 sons of Israel, whatever. I've done that, I think, like 3 times, whatever. It's the 12 sons, 12 tribes of Israel. And I mentioned, too, that later on we'll be talking about 10. But at this point, we're not. We're supposed to be talking about 12. Also, when I went through the genealogy, going down to the genealogy of Jesus, the Lord Jesus, and showed that on a chart, or on a list anyway, I mentioned that Judah had 2 sons, Pharez, I think I said Pharez and I don't even remember what I said, but both were starting with P, PH, whatever. But it's Pharez and Zara is what the correct 2 sons are. And he had more sons than that. And I didn't even go into that part, but let's just go into it right now a wee bit. And he had 3 sons. He had which is E-R, and then Onan and Shelah. And they were with a Canaanite mother. In other words, he married a Canaanite woman, which, of course, he was absolutely not supposed to do. God told the tribes of Israel when he brought them out of Egypt and was bringing them into the promised land and traveling around for 40 years because of all of their problems and their disobedience and their lack of belief and faith in Yahweh God. He told them that he wanted them to get in that land, which then was controlled by all the different Canaanite groups, tribes, and whatever, and in other words, to get rid of those Canaanites and do them in, kill them off, and then take their property, take their land. And of course, Israel did some of that under Joshua, but they didn't complete the job. They didn't get it all done. So I just want to read just a couple comments here out of this book. You can see this book, Who's Who in the Bible. Just a large pocket book. And part in here on Judah. And he mentions in here, Judah is among the best known sons of Jacob because his offspring became Israel's tribe of Judah. All right, so the children of Judah became, of course, the tribe then of Judah, one of the 12 tribes. Now, when tricked into fathering children by his widowed daughter-in-law, Tamar, you remember that name, Tamar, Judah also became an ancestor of Jesus, of the Lord Jesus Christ. So then it goes on here, it mentions, which I just mentioned, Judah married a Canaanite woman and fathered 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. And each, the 2 first, and Onan, both, they married Tamar, who was an Israelite woman. No problem there. There was a problem with the mother of the boys because she was a Canaanite. And Judah was not to have done that. But here he tries to marry off his sons to an Israelite woman, Tamar. and God killed the first two sons. They had no real relations with Tamar and producing children. God killed them. So then the last one was Shelah, and he was too young to be married to Tamar. So Judah told her, well, just, hang in there, stay in your father's house and wait. And when my son Shelah gets old enough, then you can marry him. And then when that time came about, Judah didn't do anything about it. And so Tamar figured that she'd just go ahead and do something herself. So she, knew where Judah was going and traveling and so on and so forth. And so she fixed herself up as being a woman of ill repute and establishing herself on the side of the road. And then when Judah came along, she beckoned to him. Now, he didn't recognize who she was, but he beckoned to him and had her come in, and he had sex with her. And that sexual union is what produced the two sons, Pharez and Zerah, who then became very prominent sons in the whole ball of wax. And that goes down, then the Pharez line goes down and produces both sides of the Lord Jesus Christ's genealogy, both on Joseph and on Mary's side. So those were things that I had messed up a little bit on that last video. And also when I was talking about Esau, I mentioned that Esau, who was Jacob's twin brother, that he had married against the wishes of, not only that would be the wishes of God, but the wishes of his father and mother, of Isaac and Rebekah, and that he married Hittites and also married into his uncle Ishmael's family. And just mentioned that one of them involved there was Elon the Hittite. And when you look in Genesis 36:2, you see that the Hittites, it mentions that the Hittites are of Canaan, or at least it's shown that the Hittites are of Canaan, so they're Canaanites. And then Zibeon is another person that I looked up here, Zibeon the Hivite, and that's also in Genesis 36:2, and that mentions, there you see that the Hivites are of Canaan. So those were two that he married into. So he married into the Hittites, the Hivites, and then married into Ishmael's people. So that's probably the main reason why God rejected him. God says, Esau I hate and Jacob I love. So that's kind of the story on that. Now, I wanted to go into a subject here in regard to what are the people who now, of course, are running so many things in the world, and they have a state over in the Mideast called the State of Israel. Wanted to go into something, a word that they use when regarding to people that are not the same as them. So that would be me, for instance, or anyone that's close to my situation in race, that is. And that is the word goy. So they call us, well, not just whites, they call blacks, yellows, whites, anybody that's not of their own tribe, they call us goy. And I download a few things from Google searches. You can see here is dictionary, the dictionary result for goy and some information on that. So I'll just go through that. I got a couple other papers here too. And this is the Jewish name for a non-Jew. Urban Dictionaries says a non-Jew, someone that's not Jewish. Wikipedia says in modern Hebrew and Yiddish, the word goy is the standard term for a Gentile. That's just another thing that we're called Gentiles. In English, the use of the word goy can be controversial. It is used pejoratively to refer to a non-Jew. And that's the typical thing, you know. They're special, and they're a supremacy people. I mean, they are the supreme. And when they talk about anyone else and say goy, they're not saying something nice. They're putting you down. You're a goy, or your people are goyim. So then again in Wikipedia, it says borrowed from Yiddish, from Hebrew, and it shows the Hebrew word here, nation, Gentile nation. And that actually is the real meaning, or correct translation of the word into English is nation, or not Gentile, but nation or people. And then, okay, what else do they say in here? The word goy technically refers to non-Jews, but rather, hold on, the word goy technically refers not to non-Jews. Okay, I knew that was wrong when I read that. No, it's not, it's technically does not refer to non-Jews, but rather to a nation per se. The Jews are said to constitute a goy, but through common usage, namely referring to the other non-Jewish nations, the word came to colloquially refer to non-Jews. Now, let me go to the next sheet I've got here, and we'll get into a little more of this. And here's a couple more things from, let's see, this is Wikipedia, and Wikipedia things. They're in Wikipedia under, I believe it's under goy. Yeah. So it says here, goy, Hebrew regular plural goyim, is the standard Hebrew biblical term for a nation. The word nation has been the common translation of the Hebrew goy, or in the Greek, ethnos, which is then shows up in the Septuagint, from the earliest English language Bibles, such as the 1611 King James Version. Also, the Tyndale Bible is following the Latin Vulgate, which used both Gentile and nations. The term nation did not have the same political connotations it entails today. The word Gentile is a synonym for the Hebrew word nokri, which signifies stranger or non-Jew. Well, that is not necessarily correct either. This is all this stuff that are, unfortunately, our church people within Christianity have just deluded us with. But anyway, long before Roman times, it had also acquired the meaning of someone who is not Jewish. It is also used to refer to individuals from non-Jewish religious or ethnic groups. When used in this way in English, it occasionally has pejorative, there you go, connotations, and non-Jews find it disparaging. The term goy is not inherently any more or less offensive than the term Gentile, unlike the term shagets. In other words, they're saying it's not really offensive, that it's no more offensive than you'd be called Gentile. Now, in church, you've probably heard people say, well, a lot of people say, of course, I'm just a sinner saved by grace, but they also say, well, I'm just a Gentile, you know, or we're all just Gentiles. Okay, so that's what we're called. Now, what is this Shagets that it mentions here? Let's just pull that sheet out of my little board here. Take a look before we do any more. Here's the thing again from the computer. Shagets from Wikipedia. Okay. So it says, is a Yiddish word that has entered English to refer to a non-Jewish boy or young man. It is used disparagingly. Now there you go again. In other words, they're not saying something really nice when they call somebody a Shagets. It says the word Shagets, like its feminine counterpart, shiksa. Now there's another one. You may have heard that. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, is derived from, I don't know for sure, I don't know how to pronounce this, I didn't look it up, but shakis, maybe shakis, which means a detested thing. A detested thing. So that's what we are to those people that have that country over there in the Mideast. We are a detested thing. The blacks, the yellows, the whites, Hispanics, whoever, they are detested things. It says here, in former times it was common practice for Ashkenazi Jews, that is, Jews in Eastern Europe, who were harassed by youths, to label their tormentors Schotzim, I think it would be. I didn't look up the pronunciation of that one either. Schotzim. And it says that Nachum Grossbard of Haifa, writing in the memorial book for the community of a Polish name there, which I'm not going to be able to pronounce, 1962, recounted these memories of his early years in Poland. Quote, at the finish of the match, as soon as the whistle blows, we Jewish boys run as fast as we can, out of breath, all the way home in order not to have stones thrown at us or to be hit by the Stotzim, which is a plural for the Shagets. I think that's a plural. And the Free Dictionary mentions that it's often offensive. Well, of course it's offensive. Well, you say, well, okay, well, those non-Jewish boys, I mean, they were oppressing those Jewish boys, so they probably had it coming. But why would the non-Jewish boys be giving them a hard time? You got to think about that a little bit. Why would that be the case? Now, going on with this, the thing I was looking at here from Wikipedia before I looked up that Shagets, or showed you the Shagets thing. It says, as the Jews considered all of the non-Jewish nations in biblical times as polytheistic and idolatrous, the Hebrew word goy has for some time acquired the meaning heathen. In a more comprehensive definition, the word goy corresponds to the later term umat ha'olam, nations of the world. And I have a little section in this video in which I show you some verses printed out in my Bible study program on the computer that show the different verses there, especially, well, I think it's all the ones it's showing are in Genesis. And they're all showing nations, heathen nations, and so on in red. So you can see that they're in red. And those are all goy. What I did was I searched for goy, the Hebrew word goy, which is Hebrew number 1471. And then it shows the verses in the King James Bible. And there are numbers of the verses that are not, they're not non-Jewish people. They're referring to the 12 tribes of Israel. That's what they're referring to. And yet the Jews, right away thought, oh, goy, well, yeah, you're a goy. We're Israel. Israelis, it's different. But you're a goy. You guys are goyim, So, well, no, that's not really what the Bible says. It's not really what the Bible says. So here it says the word goy means nation in biblical Hebrew, and the Torah, goy and its variants appear over 550 times in reference to Israelites and to Gentile nations. In other words, that would be what they mean there would be non-Jewish. That they're not referring to the tribes of Israel, but to other nations, over 550 times. The first recorded usage of goyim occurs in Genesis 10:5 and applies innocuously to non-Jewish nations. And I would agree with that, that is what that is. It talks about the title, the Tidal, King of Nations. Now, the first mention of goy in relation to the Israelites comes in Genesis 12:2, when God promises Abraham that his descendants will form a goy gadol, in other words, a great nation. So all the time when God is telling Abraham, Isaac, Jacob that he's going to bless them with a mighty nation and with a multiplicity of nations, God is always using the word goy. But if you really listen to the Jews, then you'd say, well, hold a minute. God is going to make all the descendants, all the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob non-Jews? No, because the Jews don't tell us the truth about what the word means. It says in Exodus 19:6, the Israelites are referred to as a goy kadosh, a holy nation. There again, the word in there is goy. And it's not referring to non-Israelite or non-12 tribe people, or as today we're told, the Jews. Well, the books of the Hebrew Bible often use goy to describe the Israelites. Important now, the later Jewish writings tend to apply the term to other nations. So they're giving them a negative connotation. In other words, these goy, these are the heathen. These are the bad characters here. But that's not necessarily the case. You've got to look at the verse and the context to find out what God is talking about, who God is talking about. So anyway, I think that's, let's see, do I have anything else on that here on my little sheets? In the I did an urban dictionary search. You can see here, Google Urban Dictionary search. And just says goy is a Hebrew word used in the Jewish scriptures. And there you go again, the Jewish scriptures. They're not Jewish scriptures. Also known as the Old Testament. The word means nation and is always used within these scriptures to refer to the nations of the world. Always refer to the nations of the world. Specifically within the Old Testament, Judah, which is the Jewish nation, that's in parentheses here, itself is called a goy. So I'm not sure what this writer that's writing this means when he says always used within these scriptures to refer to the nations of the world. Maybe he means it's just referring to any nations, and you have to look at the context to find out what it is. I would agree with that. But if he's saying that it's always referring to the nations of the world, meaning other than 12 tribes of Israel nations, then he's wrong. So I don't know which way he's going with that. And then number two, he has in the Old Testament, the Jews were called to be a nation separate from the other nations, which were all pagan. And so colloquially, all non-Jewish nations came to be called Goyim. why, why did they become to be called Goyim? Because Goyim are 12 tribes of Israel. It's a plural, so they're Goy nations is what they are. It's because those people are using these words against us. That's the why of it. So he says, okay, so the non-Jewish nations became to be called Goyim, as in the nations from which the God of the Old Testament had called upon the Jews to separate themselves. A word used by some Jews to refer to Gentiles, pardon me, a little itch there, which are then non-Jews, and that is not correct either. That is not correct. Gentiles is a word that should not even be in our King James Bible. There should not be, you should not be able to read in our King James Bible and see the word Gentiles, because it's completely bad. That is a bad translation. But if you do read in there and see the words, which of course are there, you have to determine the context of the sentence, etc., what that word is. It does not mean non-Jews. So he says here the word can have derogatory connotations. There you go. All right. That's what I said. And the other one said that. Yeah. Derogatory connotations, putting us down, such as the word black when used to refer to a person of African descent. It can be neutral or negative depending on the context and the intent of the speaker. Okay, so that's about that for that information on a little bit of discussion on Goy. And another thing I mentioned Esau, the brother of Jacob, twin brother of Jacob. And Esau became Edom. In other words, the Bible says Esau is Edom. So, which means red. Now, when he came out, he was hairy and red and all over. And that's where it comes from, that Esau, Edom, red. Anyway, if you're a Bible student, and I hope you are, Bible reader, you certainly have heard of Herod. Herod. There was one of the Herods was the one that cut John the Baptist's head off when Salome danced for him, and she said, "Oh, give me John the Baptist's head on a platter." And so he ordered it, and that was the end of John the Baptist. Well, here. Okay, let's see. What book is this? Here we go. Unger's Bible Dictionary. Big, thick Unger's Bible Dictionary. And an article in here on Herod. And I'm certainly not going to read the whole thing, but I want to read just a couple things here. There are a number of Herods. It's a whole family of Herods. And so down here under Herod the Great, BC 37 to 4. So he was 37 years before Christ, down to 4 years before Christ. That's when he was living. It says history. The father of Herod the Great was named Antipater, or Antipater, however you want to pronounce that. He was of Idumaean blood. That's the Edomites. So he was descended, at least partly descended, from Esau, who married Hittites, Hivites, and Ishmaelites for his wives. Completely against what God would want. So he was of Idumean blood. The Idumeans were of the Edomite stock, the descendants from Esau. They occupied a southern district of Palestine known as the Negev, located between the Mediterranean and the Dead Sea and southward. Then he goes on to say here, by conquest, that's using power. By conquest, John Hyrcanus, who is the one that's in the Apocrypha, which normally most of us don't ever read. The Apocrypha has First Maccabees, Second Maccabees, and so on, and that's about John Hyrcanus and his control over Judea. So the Judahites, back in those days, this is BC 130 it's talking about here, so like 130 years before Christ came on the scene. So it says, by conquest, John Hyrcanus brought the Idumaeans into Palestine about BC 130, and as they conformed to the Jewish rite of circumcision, now of course this writer is going to say Jewish rather than biblical rite, or say Yahweh's rite of circumcision, or the Judahite tribe of Judah rite of circumcision. No, he's going to say Jewish. The Jewish rite of circumcision. They embraced the Jewish religion. And when he says that they embraced the Jewish religion, what was the Jewish religion at that time, 130 BC? It was a corrupted, in other words, it's when we read what we call our Old Testament, we read Moses and the prophets, the kings, and Chronicles, Joshua, and the Judges, and all of that, Psalms and everything, the prophets, Ezekiel and Jeremiah, the minor prophets, and so on. That is the Old Testament or Old Covenant Hebrew Bible. That's God's religion, Yahweh's religion. And when the tribe, the residual part of the tribe of Judah, which was still in the land around 500 BC, they were centered in Jerusalem. The Babylonians came in and took them out of Jerusalem and put them out of the land. And they burned Jerusalem down, destroyed the temple, whole ball of wax went on there. And so those Judeans, or you want to call them Judahites, went into the Babylonian captivity, and they were promised, it was promised by God, by his prophets, that they were to have 70 years of captivity. And then Cyrus, the Persian king, or was he the Medes? I can't remember if Cyrus was under the Medes and Persians. It's a combined situation there. But anyway, Cyrus, 70 years later, then Cyrus then said, okay, Yahweh God has told me that you're supposed to be able to return to Jerusalem to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and to rebuild the temple. And so that's when they went, certain of them went back, and that's Ezra and Nehemiah, the books of Ezra and Nehemiah talk about that. So that's like, let's just say 500, and then 70 years later, going back. And in Babylon, man, have you ever heard of Babylon? I mean, the Bible is Revelation, in the book of Revelation. Nothing good to say about Babylon. Nothing good to say. come out from among them, my people. Well, so they were corrupted in Babylon and got into all kinds of wicked stuff, all kinds of wicked ideas. And this is where the Talmud comes from, that time that they were in Babylon. A lot of them stayed in Babylon. They didn't come back. They stayed there. Now, there are many other Judahites from the tribe of Judah that were taken into the Assyrian captivity a couple hundred years before that, when the 10 tribes of Israel. There's now, I said it right, the 10 tribes of Israel, because that's when we get talking about the 10 tribes. When they were taken into the captivity by the Assyrians, Shalmaneser being one of the kings, and there were other ones too. But then most of the Judahites in the smaller cities and so on in Judah, in the land of Judah, were also taken. But he was not able to take Jerusalem. So that group then headquartered in Jerusalem stayed there for approximately a couple hundred years more. But then they were taken by the new power, which had overcome the Assyrians, the new bigwig power, which then were the Babylonians. They were taken into Babylonian captivity, but it was only to be for 70 years. And some of them came back, but many of them did not come back. And many of in other words, the Levites, the priestly class, stayed there and did a lot of study and some nasty things. And so some of them coming back brought all that nasty stuff back with them. That's what Jesus is talking about when he comes against the scribes and Pharisees and talks about their adherence to the traditions of the elders and so on. These ideas that Moses was given 2 sets of laws on how Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, were to live. One was in the tablets, and then in his teaching that we see in the Bible when we read Exodus and Leviticus, Deuteronomy, and then we see that, okay, everyone else has seen that, all right, that's written down, so we can see it. But then they say that he was also given a whole another set of teachings verbally that were not written down. And so that's the traditions of the elders. And you get all this corruption that was brought back out of Babylon. And that's what Jesus came against them and said, you guys are, bad news. He called them snakes. You're snakes, vipers, and that your teaching is all wrong, and you're completely destroying God's law and destroying the people with all this stuff that you're teaching. So anyway, that's part of what that whole business about there. And I just want to mention one more thing here, that in this article in Unger's Bible Dictionary on Herod, which is on page 470, is where it starts. He says under character, he says Herod was not only an Idumaean in race and a Jew in religion. In other words, he was conforming to whatever the religion was at that time, 130 years before Christ, which was God's religion as we know it in the Bible, and then all this other corruption added in with it. But it says, but he was a heathen in practice and a monster in character. During his administration as king, he evidenced himself to be exceedingly crafty, jealous, cruel, and revengeful. He exercised his kingly power with the disposition of a very despot. This characteristic was illustrated in its worst form toward the several members of his own family. He had 9 or 10 wives, and on the merest suspicion put to death his favorite wife, Miriam, I think would be, and also her brothers. And I think he also put to death Aristobulus and Alexander. Is it what it's saying here? Let's see. And at last, when on his own deathbed, just 5 days before he died himself, he ordered his son Antipater to be slain. So he was one wicked character. Those Herods were, I'll tell you, Idumaeans. And the important thing is John Hyrcanus, who was the leader of the Judean people. In other words, hopefully, they would primarily be Judahites of the 12 tribes of Israel. He brought all these Idumaeans in and had them convert to being Jews, you know, of what they called Jews. All right, that's just something to ponder. I just came a couple days ago, I just came across in my study here on this whole business, I came across something I found kind of interesting. I just wanted to mention it here. Let's see, I got to turn my Bible back to Psalm 22 here. I was looking off onto some things that were about that. Psalm 22 starts out, well, I just mentioned Psalm 22. There are a lot of things in here that are prophetic as far as they're what we call messianic. In other words, they're about Jesus the Messiah. Starts out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? I mean, you know, woo, that's right from the Gospels. Jesus is on the cross. Oh my God, I cry by day, but thou dost not answer, and by night, but I have no rest. Yet thou art holy, O thou who art enthroned upon the praises of Israel. In thee our fathers trusted, they trusted, and thou didst deliver them. To thee they cried out, and were delivered. In thee they trusted, and were not disappointed. And it goes on and say in verse 6, but I am a worm and not a man, a reproach of men and despised by the people. And that's also in the Old Testament. We read about that Jesus was despised. He was despised. He was known that anybody would want. All who see me sneer at me. They separate with the lip. They wag the head, saying, commit yourself to Yahweh, to the Lord, right? To Yahweh. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him, because he delights in him. Well, that's what they were saying when he was on the cross. Come down, come down. You say you're the big, the big Son of God or whatever. Come down, So anyway, in verses 16 through 18, look what down there it says. I thought this was interesting. For dogs have surrounded me. A band of evildoers has encompassed me. They pierced my hands and they pierced my feet. Well, there you go again. That's crucifixion. See, all these things in this Psalm 22, so many things about the crucifixion. But the dogs have surrounded me. A band of evildoers has encompassed me. And verse 17 says, I can count all my bones. They look, they stare at me. They divide my garments among them. And for my clothing they cast lots. There you go. Crucifixion, again. And was there another verse here in it? Verse 20. Deliver my soul from the sword, my only life. That seems like it's strange. The word life, I guess, is not in the original Hebrew. And so I don't know for sure what that really means. But my only life from the power of the dog. Power of the dog. So the dogs are surrounding him. Well, if you remember, I think it's the Syrophoenician woman. I think it's the case of the Syrophoenician woman in the Gospels when Jesus is going into the Samaritan area and the disciples have gone to get food. So they come back and they see him talking to this woman. And that's the case where the woman comes to him and asks him to heal her daughter. And he says to her that it's not right to give the gifts, I think it's gifts it says, or I should have had it ready so I could read here, but I don't have it. To the dogs. So he's calling her a dog. Calling her a dog. I mean, this is our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, calling this woman a dog. Now, either she's a Syrophoenician woman or she's a Samaritan woman. I can't remember which way it is in there. I think it's Syrophoenician woman. And she says, well, yes, Lord, yeah, I know, I agree with that. But at least the little dogs, she's saying, what she's really saying is the puppies are able to get, to gather up what the children have spilled off of the table. Now, of course, what Jesus was talking about there was that he says, I came not but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. That's why he came. I came not but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He didn't come to dogs. He didn't come to non-Israelites. He didn't come to the people that had not been cast off by God and divorced and cast off in the Assyrian captivity. We'll go into this whole thing later on. I'm not going to go into it. I can't go into it right now, but we'll go into it more later on. But then he said that her faith was, he was very surprised. Her faith was really great. And that she had such understanding. And he said, you go, your daughter's healed. So he healed her daughter. But the Samaritans were they were from a people that had been brought in from Cuthoth, by the Assyrians, when the Assyrians took the 10 tribes of Israel out of Samaria, in other words, out of the kingdom of Israel around 700 BC, and then they brought other people in there to fill in that land, and those people were from Cuthoth, and those are the people that were called Samaritans. So they're not an Israelite people. Now they probably in other words interbred with some of the Israelites, so they're a half-breed type people. They were probably half-breed type people even in Cuthoth. But that's who they are, and that's who Jesus was talking to, and he called her a dog. And here on this one in Psalm 22. And so what I'm thinking here is the possibility that what he's referring to is that these particular, what they call themselves Jews, scribes, Pharisees, whatever, Sadducees, Pharisees, and so on and so forth, were very likely they were a mixed breed. They were partly from these Edomites that John Hyrcanus brought in and made them Jews, or allowed them to be Jews, and then to become part of the Judah nation, and therefore they were dogs. So just something to think about there. Okay, well, there's a ton of other things, but that's all I'm going to tackle right now. And I do have a couple of, like I said, a couple of little parts that I made a few days ago where I'm showing some things on the screen. And so those will be there also. Okay. So enough for now, and I hope we're learning. Hope we're learning something. And there's much more to learn. There is so much. There is so much. This whole subject is like tons and tons and tons and tons of information and whatever. It's really overwhelming, and I'm having a real problem trying to figure out exactly how to go about putting this out. So I'm really struggling with that, but anyway, I'm just going to keep going along. And all right, so just what is it today? It's Tuesday the 5th of March. I was surprised I didn't hear anything about the Ides of March. I mean, I'm no great historical character, but I thought the 3rd of March was the Ides of March, the time when they killed Caesar in Rome. I think that's what that refers to. I didn't hear anything about that. But whatever. Tuesday, the 5th of March today. So hope you guys have a good day. All right. Thanks. Thanks a lot. All right. This is from Strong's Concordance. The Hebrew word number 1471, which is goy. And we're just going to go over this a little bit. This is so that you can see it here. I'm talking about it before you're seeing it here, and I might be talking about it after too. But at least here you'll see it. It shows the Hebrew word. There you can see the actual Hebrew word as it's printed out. Transliteration is goy. The phonetic pronunciation, goy. Hebrew word it shows again there. Transliteration, goy. That's kind of a duplication there. I think that's actually showing the type. I'm not an English, I'm not a word expert, but the type of word it is. And then Vine's dictionary of Hebrew words, meaning they have nation. Okay, then it shows what the King James Version has in regard to that particular number 1471, how it's translated by the translators of the King James Version Bible. So it's translated as nation 374 times, as heathen 143 times, as Gentiles 30 times, and as people 11 times. Total count 558. All right, then down below it's showing there what the word means as far as the translators are concerned. That is Strong's. Strong as putting in the meaning for this word. And he did his work in the late middle to late 1800s. So it says rarely, and I don't know why that says rarely, I have no idea. Shortened, rarely it's shortened goy. Now, maybe it just means rather than goy, it's goy shortened, rarely. That I'm not sure. But it says apparently from the same root as the Hebrew word gavah, which would be 1465, in the sense of massing. So this gavah means a massing of things, and they're meaning the idea of a massing of people, animals, etc. That's the concept and the root of the word. But then they say, okay, now what does it mean as far as Strong's is concerned? It means a foreign nation. Get that? Important. A foreign nation. All right? Not Israel, not Judah, not the 12 tribes of Israel, their nations, or the entire, considering the entire kingdom of Israel or the kingdom of Judah after they were busted up into two different kingdoms. No, this is a foreign nation, so it would not be Israel or Israelites or Judah or Judahites. This is what this is telling us. Hence, therefore, it is a Gentile. Now, that is what we are called by the Jews. We're called Gentiles. And even all of our Christian churches, generally, whether we're black, yellow, red, white, whatever, in a supposed Christian church, we would be called a Gentile if we're not a Jew. So it's a foreign nation, therefore it's called, the word means a Gentile. So in the Bible, we see that word Gentile over and over and over again, hundreds of times. So that's what this is saying that is the case. Also figurative, a troop of animals or a flight of locusts or something along that line. And then it says, it gives four cases here that are shown above in the English words used in the King James Version: Gentile, heathen, nation, people. And so that's all I'm doing here now. Just tell you that much and showing you what that looks like. My little camera, and I just made a little copy of this from my Bible computer Bible program. The search results for the Hebrew word number 1471. Now, if you can see my little pointer up here in the left corner, a little white pointer, you can see it says 1471 and 558 occurrences and 511, I think it says 511 sections. Okay, so that's the word goy. Now, we can look here in, this is all King James Version it's showing here, in Genesis 10:5 going down through Genesis 17:20. Now, this verse 10:5, this is talking about, it's using the word, or in other words, it's coming up with a translation it's using as Gentiles. Right? Most of these are nation, as you can see here, the red. This one has Gentiles. So the isles of the Gentiles dividing their lands. And this is talking about the, I'm not talking about Israelites, all right? Talking about the children or descendants from, basically from Noah. And then, so here it mentions Ham. The next one is Genesis 10:20. It mentions the sons of Ham and their families and so on. And then over here it'll have nations, again, their nations. But here now, Shem. Now here's Shem. That's who Abraham is descended from, Shem. So now we're getting into the very people that Abraham is from. Therefore, that Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Israel. So the Israelites, they're from. And so you can't see it over here, but the word nation or nations will show up in that one. And then these are the families of the sons of Noah. So then this is talking about Ham, Shem, and Japheth, all three of the sons of Noah. And then it mentions in their nations. And Genesis 12:2, and I will make of thee a great nation. So here's the promise of Yahweh to Abraham, that is going to make him a great nation. Now remember what this word is. This word is goy. Goy. All right? That's what the Jews call non-Jews. Goy. And basically what they're talking, when they say that, they're considering them as animals. Because according to the Jews, the only real people, or if you want to say humans, are the Jews. All others are animals. So the very word being translated nation here in the Bible from the Masoretic text, the Hebrew Masoretic text, is the word goy. So this is not talking about some animal. God is not going to make Abraham the father of a great bunch of animals or a great bunch of non-Jews, if you want to use the term non-Jews, which is what the Jews say. The goy is non-Jewish. The non-Jews are goy or Gentiles, as in the word up above here, Gentiles. All right, so then the next one, and it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar. Well, that's right. You can't see my pointer because I'm looking at the computer and I'm looking at my pointer in there. I keep forgetting that. You're not seeing that. I'm seeing it in my computer, but you're not seeing it. Anyway, so that's Genesis 14:1. And so that's not talking about the Israelite people. And Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and so on, title king of nations. That's not talking about Israelite people. Or as the Jews would say, the Jewish people. But the next one here and also that nation whom they will serve. So that's talking about Egypt being the ones that the Israelites were in bondage to. So that's, again, not talking about Israelites, but rather the Egyptians. But the next one, Genesis 17:4, as for me, behold, my covenant is with thee, and thou shalt be a father of many nations. And there again, it's Abraham again, his Israelite descendants. Neither shall thy name any more be called Abram, but thy name shall be Abraham. And again, the word nation is going to be, he's going to make nations for him. But what, non-Jewish, Goy nations? No. The word Goy means nation or people. It does not mean another foreign nation. It can be used of that. To me, it can be used in that way. But the Jews just go ahead and say, oh, everyone's a Goy. If they're not Jewish, they're a Goy. No, Goy means nation. Now, how do you find out if someone is a foreign nation or another nation outside of the nations that were developed through Abraham? Well, you determine that by the context of the sentence in the Bible. But that's not what they give us. And I will make thee exceeding fruitful, and I will make nations of thee. And here I will bless her and give thee a son also of her. Yea, I will bless her and make nations out of her. That's referring to Sarah. And as for Ishmael, I have heard thee, behold. So, and that's Genesis 17:20. So here again, talking about Ishmael, he's going to make him a great nation. And then the next verse in there that you can't see here because that's all I showed. But next one, he says, well, why he's going to do this? Why is God, Yahweh, going to do this for Ishmael? Because Ishmael is a seed. He's a descendant of Abraham. Now, he's not the promised descendant as Isaac was. So he's not part of the Israel nations, but he is a descendant, and he's being given a nation by God because he is the seed of Abraham. So just showing you that here so you can get an idea of what's going on in the King James Bible and how they translate these words. And the translation is, when they use Gentiles, that really is not a correct translation. It's really nation is the correct translation of the word Goy, not really Gentiles, because Gentiles doesn't really necessarily mean anything. Anyway, okay, so then you can see this.